So Paul and the whole Sanhedrin are at it, and Paul, of course, was a Pharisee. The Pharisees do believe in the resurrection and the afterlife, and angels. The Sadducees do not. I don't know how somebody could not believe in an afterlife, because what's the purpose of life? Today's kind of modern-day atheists that believe that we'll die and we'll just turn into worm food, and that's it. I don't understand how somebody could live their life with that, because what's the purpose? And sadly, we see the unfortunate consequence of that, of despair, right? And the ultimate form of despair is suicide, because people think, well, what's the point of living? There's nothing to live for. So Paul is trying to proclaim the resurrection of Christ, saying, no, indeed, there is great hope. There is great hope that we have. And Jesus, in his prayer to the Father here, he's saying, Father, they are your gift to me. He's referring to us. We are the gift to Jesus. Perhaps we don't think that way very often. I wish that where I am, they also may be with me. So Jesus desires communion with us. He desires for us to be with him in heaven. That's his wish. That he sees that as a gift. Oftentimes we, think of the act of contrition. I fear the loss of heaven and the pains of hell. Right? That's imperfect contrition. But then perfect contrition is, but most of all, because I love you. Lord, I'm sorry for my sins because I love you and I know that they hurt you. Because you desire good for me. And you see me doing harm to myself and to others, and therefore that hurts you. And so if we can live our lives recognizing that God isn't waiting for us to mess up and waiting to play gotcha and waiting to squash us, but rather he's watching over us and he's saying, I love you, right? The best definition of God that St. Paul gives us is God is love. Not as an emotion, not as a feeling, but an action of the will, an outpouring of self. So God pours himself out for us because he loves us. And so he desires communion with us. He desires to be with him and with the Father in heaven. So there's great hope, right? We live here on earth, and it's difficult. We toil, and there's hardship, and there's suffering, and we make mistakes, and we sin, and we mess up. But yet, he continues to love us. He continues to love us. That doesn't mean that just because he loves us, as I said a few weeks ago, it's not this unconditional love where he loves us no matter what, even if we reject him. Well, he can't, because it's a two-way street. And so God's love for us is so great, it's so profound that it's, and the love between the Son and the Father is so profound that it produces another person, the Holy Spirit, whom we will receive on Sunday at Pentecost. And so we recognize ultimately that God's love for us is such a great power. We might think of it as something trivial and just kind of go back to the 60s and say, God is love. But that's a very profound statement, that God is love, that God pours out his life for us so that we may have life with him for eternity. So as we approach Pentecost, let us ask that the Holy Spirit may ever enlighten our hearts, that we may recognize that love that God has for us, that we may love him and love our neighbors with that same love.